Okay, so we're doing the Ralbag's Toalos on Megilas Rus, which I'll review in a second what that means. I want to start off with a quote from a fellow student of Rabbi Moskowitz, Shlomo Engelson, who posted on Facebook saying, "I don't remember any specific Torah that I learned from Rabbi Moskowitz, but I remember very clearly the beginning of my very first class with him, Mishlei, I believe. He said, 'I'll make you guys a deal. I won't give you any homework, and you won't expect me to prepare for class. We'll just learn together.'" And that was the greatest lesson of all. So when I read that, I was like, "Oh, that sounds like my approach in a lot of these shiurim." So this though, usually I do take a look at something beforehand. This I really have not prepared. This is I'm sure I've looked at it in the past, but not this year. So we're just gonna see where this leads us. Okay. So to recap, we did earlier this year most of the Ralbag's Toalos on Megilas Esther, and what we mean by that is that Ralbag, in an ideal world, he doesn't do this all the time, has a three-part commentary. So in Chumash, he does it the most consistently. He has the Be'er HaMilos, the Be'er HaSipur or Be'er HaDvarim, and then the Toalos. So the Be'er HaMilos is like Metzudas Tzion, which is a glossary of terms where he defines the difficult or ambiguous terms before you start reading the parsha. Then he has a Be'er HaDvarim or Be'er Divrei HaSipur, where he basically like walks you through the psukim and gives like a flowing commentary. Sometimes it's totally flowing. Sometimes it's Dibur HaMaskil style, where he'll quote part of the pasuk and then comment on it. And then the third part is the Toalos, which I like translating as useful or beneficial lessons, where he extracts lessons to learn from the psukim. And these are usually divided into three categories. Mitzvos, middos, and deos. Mitzvos are halacha, middos are character traits, lessons in character traits, and then deos are ideas in philosophy or in science or in metaphysics. But he doesn't always stick to that rigid triple categorization. Sometimes he just will give a Toelos and not categorize it, or he'll say, some other name of the Toelos. Okay. And what we learned when we did Megilas Esther is that, the lessons he draws are very interesting. Sometimes it seems like this is, for lack of a better term, like the natural lesson that you would derive from the psukim. So, for example, in Megilas Esther, when Esther decrees the fast on all the Jewish people, I don't even know if I'm making this up or if I'm remembering this. He says, you see from here that like in a time of tzara, of catastrophe, you should turn to Hashem, and fast and do tshuva, so that the hashgacha relates to you. So that's like a natural lesson. Other times he had idea Toalos that seemed very, very strange. Like in the first parak, he had a lot of the Toalos about how to throw a good party. That you should give each guest what they want and not force them to eat or drink anything, and that it's good if the men and women are separate. So like we were trying to get a sense of like what is he trying to do in the Toalos. So I would like to view this as a continuation of that meta question, and then just learn as many ideas as we can from the Toalos that he gives. I think the disadvantage, I'm pretty confident in saying this for the four of us who are here, we don't know Megilas Rus as well as we know Megilas Esther. Okay, so unlike Megilas Esther, where we were able to mostly stay anchored in the Toalos section and then only occasionally go to the Psukim and the Ralbag's commentary, here we might need to do that more depending on how much he's assuming that we know. And the last thing is I'll mention that like last time, I just used ChatGPT to translate the English. I'm going to translate this on my own in the Hebrew audibly. What's the word I'm looking for? Verbally. But I'm having the English on the screen. If you notice anything, I'm not always going to look at the English. If you notice anything that is drastically different from what I say, feel free to point it out. Okay, so he says, Hine Hatoelas Rishon, the first lesson, Lahodia, is to teach us She'ein Roy La'adam She'yizbolel Ba'amim. There you go, Tamar. That it is not fitting for a person to intermingle with the non-Jewish nations. Aval Yisrachik Mizel Lefi Mash Efshar. He should distance himself from this as much as possible. Hello, Tira. Don't you see Mashakara Elimelech? But Hitama'o ben Hagoyim. Don't you see what happened to Elimelech when he became, how do they translate Hitama'o? He assimilated among the nations. Kizeh hayasiba el shenis chatenu banav im benosehem umesuhu behem bisman katzar. That this assimilation was a cause of Elimelech and his sons with their daughters. That must mean his daughters-in-law. Oh no, sorry. Nischatu banav im benoseim, to for his sons to marry their daughters, the daughters of the non-Jews. Umesuhu v'heim bisman katzer, and he and his sons died in a short amount of time. V'lo nishar mehem davar, and no male offspring remained. V'alva pi shnis gairu benoseim, even though his daughters converted, lo hispik zeh, this was not enough. Ki kvar gadlu b'deos hahem uveminhagim hapchusim. They had already been raised in their opinions, their philosophical ideas, their beliefs, and in their degenerate behavior, customs. The Hayugamkin Shokdos Sham Etel B'nei Amam, and they also spent a lot of time there with their people, the members of their people. V'lo Hayu Sholtos La'azov Kol Deosem, and they were not able to abandon all of their beliefs. Ukvar Hura Shalo Azvu Kol Deosem. And how do we know this? So he says the pasuk indicates that they did not abandon their beliefs. Ki Amr Lahen Naami Shetashovna Isha Levesima, that when Naomi said each woman should return to her mother's household, I feel like that should be Amma. I'm not sure. Velu haisa yodas shehem ki Israelios. If Naomi knew that they were like Jews, lo haisa machatia osan, she would not have led them astray. Okay, in other words, when Naomi decides to go to part ways with them, she says, each of you go back to your house. So if you're talking about someone who had fully adopted Jewish beliefs and practices, then it would be leading someone astray, be leaving Iver to say, go back to your idolatrous, degenerate people. But so the fact that Naomi said this must mean that they were already like still pretty much assimilated, and she was basically just saying like, don't come back with me to Israel. And it's clear that that they had converted because Naomi said to Ruth, your sister-in-law, sorry, not your sister, your sister-in-law returned to her people and to her gods. So returning to her people and to her gods means that she had been she was a balas tshuva in the sense of conversion to the Jewish people, and now she's going back to her gods. Okay, so what do you think of this? The approach we took last time is basically to read the Ralbag and then say like, what either questions or what ideas do we see from this, or what applications do we see? Because we see that he was just trying to, the Ralbag's style is to like point out avenues of thinking that are productive for us. He's not necessarily like drawing out all the particulars. Yeah, Tamar.
I think on the conversion aspect, it's kind of interesting. I know that's not his main thing, is not to assimilate, right? That's his main point. And then he's giving a side point about the conversion. But I think on the conversion thing, it's sort of interesting. I feel like I have questions, but I'm not going to be able to spell my questions exactly directly. But I feel like there's two layers here. There's like the philosophical conversion, and there's like the halacha conversion.
Right.
And he's really talking about the philosophical one, which I think it makes sense, right? If somebody converts to Mary and they live in their home nation, like they don't have a lot on their side to like actually be able to fully convert philosophically.
Right. And we're talking here also about like when, this is during the period of the Shoftim. So we didn't even have a national center yet. And so the Jews themselves were still like in the transitionary period from Yetzias Mitzrayim in the Midbar on their way to like nationhood in Eretz Yisrael. And there was still a lot of, they still hadn't defeated all of the enemies in the land. And so like it was already like a tenuous position. And they basically, Elimelech and his family basically left for the plains of Moab, where there are no Jews, So this really would be like, trying to like the Jews, I know the Jews went all over the world, but let's say like, let's say you go to someplace remote, like someplace randomly in India or in China or in Japan where there's just no other Jews, and you try to make it there, and then you try to convert someone who's there's just no basis for like osmosis and cultural values and network, like there's just nothing. So it's not surprising that they're not going to philosophically make the transition. Yeah
I just also think it's interesting that like he seems to just be putting aside the halachic issues of like, I mean, nowadays if somebody converted, you can't just tell them to stop practicing because they're not really into it,
right. So this is actually, we gave a shiur, I think it was 2 years ago, which I just want to find the title. Nuanced Approach to Conversion. Oh no, let me just look in my shiurim. not mathematical conversion.
Can I ask a question while you're doing that? I think
Yeah,
it's a small question. If not,
sure.
we could wait. I'm just curious why you use the term balas tshuva instead of like for Orpah as a convert.
Just because that's the term he used, and that's the term that the pasuk used. That Shovna, where's pasuk? Return to your mother's house. So return implies that she left her mother's house, and we call that process generally tshuva. I know in this case she was a non-Jew, but
Yeah, that's what I was
I
wondering.
was
So
just
you can
using the
use
term
that.
from the pasuk.
Yeah, so a person can use the term that say that someone does tshuva as a non-Jew and become Jewish. Like that's an appropriate term.
I don't know if it's appropriate. I was just using the lesson that he was using. I'm
Oh,
not saying
okay, okay.
it
All right,
is
yeah,
appropriate.
okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
side
Okay, so
question. Thank you.
the shir that we gave was called Judaism's attitude towards converts as exemplified by Naomi. This was on May 27th, 2022. And that really dealt with the question of like what Naomi was doing when she was like, telling Ruth and Orpah to go back, and how in line with what we do in our halachas of conversion, that is, like to what extent do we retain that practice? And also, I think I probably mentioned in that year, it's very unclear, and I hope this is not heretical. It's very unclear what the evolution, or sorry, what the halachos of conversion were back then. Because the Torah in the Torah's Mitzvah does not spell out any procedure for conversion, but it does talk about converts all over the place. So the question always was like, what constituted conversion back then? And did that process evolve? How much of it is doraisa? How much of it is dorabanan? How much of it is learned out through the 13 middos, if that's possible even. So like it's very unclear. Uh, even if we did a halachic analysis of this, it's unclear what aspects of that halacha are we should expect to look different from what we do now, and how things were done back then. Yeah. Okay. But that year definitely has more of that. Yeah, Ayala.
Just a small point that I don't think, based off of the Psukim, it wasn't Elimelech's intention to assimilate, right? This was just like a side point that he did, and it led to these consequences.
Right. So I think that is so. Let's look at the Psukim. So the Psukim say is Vahi b'mei shafot hashoftim Vahi ra'av ba'aretz Vayelech ish min beis lechem Yehuda lagor b'sadei Moav hu v'ishto u'shnei vanav. So it was in the days of the judging of the judges, and there was a famine in the land, and a man went from the house of, from Beis Lechem Yehuda to dwell temporarily. That sounds like dwelling temporarily in the fields of Moab, he and his wife and his two sons. V'shem ha'ish Elimelech, v'shem ishto Naomi, v'shem shnei banav Machlon v'Kilion, Ephrasim, Beis Lechem Yehuda, v'yavou sadei Moab v'yihu sham. The name of the man was Elimelech, the name of his wife was Naomi, the name of his two sons were Machlon and Kilion, Ephrathites from the house from Lechem Yehuda, Beis Lechem Yehuda, and they came to this field of Moab, Yihiu Sham, and they were there. Okay, so that's another ambiguous thing, right? Is Lagur Sham, but then they came there and they were there, which is maybe a lashon of permanence. Vayamas Elimelech ish Nami vatisharhi ushne vaneha. Right. So the psukim are not 100% clear about what the motive was there. I mean, Rashi famously says Vayelech ish ashir gadol haya uparnas ador. So he was Elimelech was very wealthy and he was a leader of the generation. V'yatza Eretz Yisrael l'chutz la'aretz mipnei tsaros ayin. And he left from Eretz Yisrael to chutz la'aretz because of stinginess, not stringency, stinginess. Shahaisa eno tsara anim habaim ladochuko, because he was stingy regarding the poor people who came to pressure him to give money or to supply food. Lakach nenash, and that's why he was punished. So it definitely seems like the motive was bad, but it definitely did not seem like, I don't see any hints that he intended to assimilate. Question is, how much was assimilation on his mind, at various points? Like, when did his sons marry these Moabite women? And what was Elimelech's position towards that? How did he feel? What was his long-term plan? Those, I think it's ambiguous. Yeah, Tamar?
How did you translate Parnas Hador?
Leader.
Leader, not financial support.
Yeah, it comes from the same term, but let me just look at the Klein dictionary here and see how they translate Parnas. Parnas is manager, supporter, manager, chief, leader, administrator. From the there's a related Arabic word, governor of a district. I think it's a generic term for a leader. Yeah, as a verb, it means to support and to provide for, but as a noun, I think it usually used for a leader. Okay, so that's the first Toalos, right? So the question is, can we just get a little bit out of here by way of practicality, right? So I think tomorrow's observation is a good basis for that, which is that, and again, I talked about this at length on the shiur about converts, but like, conversion is just a legal technicality, which is necessary. But the real question is, like, ideologically and middos wise, are you Jewish or not? There is such a thing as like, Jewish middos and Jewish minhagim, not minhag like halakhic minhag, but like, let's say like, hachnasas orchim and like being a rachaman and all that stuff, being part of the intellectual culture. So the question is like, whenever you are dealing with someone who's a convert or when you're among non-Jews, it's not just a matter of guarding yourself against halacha and checking off the halachic, check boxes. The question is, what culture are you being steeped in? And ultimately, that's going to determine your relationship with halacha. Yeah. Okay. Next, Hatolas Hasheni, who lahodia. I think this is the one that we did in the last year. Kimishaba ladabik tachas kanfei shchina, someone who comes to cling under the wings of the shchina. That's a term for conversion. Roi sheyidaktiku imo la'amod al kavanaso. Imhu misrate beze milevu minefesh b'shiyim ma'enu lakavlo. So you need to be meticulous with them to arrive at a firm understanding of their intention, whether it is whether they are like resolved to do this from a whole heart and soul, b'shiyima'anu lakablo, by how do you say that? By rejecting the acceptance of him. Let's see how the ChatGPT translates it. Presence should be he should be scrutinized to determine their true intentions, whether they genuinely desire this wholeheartedly before accepting them. Okay, I hear how they're translating it. Yeah, but the main thing is you got to check out their motives. If he, remains strong and persistent in his resolve, in his opinion, zos in this resolve, in roy lahosif od laharchiko mizeh. You should not continue to discourage them from this. Lazeh timsa shekasher rasa nami barus ki mis ametas hi laleches ita. Lohosifa od laharchika mizeh. Once you find that once Naomi saw in Ruth that she was misametes, okay, which I actually want to see how Nima Nevesky translates this. V'tera ki misametes hi laleches. She saw that she was determined to go with her, okay, literally making herself strong to go with her. Once she saw that she was determined to go with her, lo hosifa od laharchika, she no longer continued to distance her, to push her away, mizeh, from this. Ki az hikira, because then she recognized ki milevu minefesh niskaya, that she converted, or that she converted out of heart and soul. Now, remember. Oh, sorry. We'll finish reading this. From here, it's clear that when someone comes to convert, it's proper to transmit to them the light halachos and the stringent halachos. Because then it'll be clear to the person what they have to accept upon themselves when they convert. And then you should distance them a little bit until you arrive at until you determine their resolve. And then once you see that she is resolved in her opinion, once you see that he's resolved in his opinion, then it is not proper to speak more with him to distance him from this anymore. Okay, now. So again, we talked about this at length at this year, so I'm not going to dwell on this. But on the one hand, this is for the sake of the convert. They need to know what they're getting into. On the other hand, this is for the sake of the nation, because if you get someone who goes into the Jewish people without knowing what they're getting themselves into, or if they're hasty, and then they start becoming lax in halacha, it's going to be very bad. Or if they defect, it's going to be very bad for the Jewish people. And on the other hand, you can't push them away too hard, because then you're going to lead them astray and like basically be closing the path of good, in front of them. Again, without going into the whole Rambam, I just want to see the Rambam. I think the Rambam uses a very strong lashon when he's talking about this in the halachos. And I'll mention, by the way, I think I mentioned this last time, that I know a bunch of cases, or I've seen a bunch of cases where these people are so, the path to conversion is made so difficult for them that they just give up. I saw a woman the other day post on Facebook that after trying so hard to convert, she said something like, "I'm done with rabbinic Judaism. I'm just going to go do what my ancestors did. And like, the ocean is a mikvah, and like, now you got someone who's going to go around thinking that she's Jewish, and she's, she's not going to be, halakhically converted, or not halakhically like known whether it's converted, and she's just doing her own thing." Or I've seen people before, a lot of people online, and I know one case in person. So, people who are genuinely like attached to Orthodox Judaism, but the basing pushes them away too hard. And again, I don't know whether the Beis Din is doing this properly or improperly, but these people end up converting conservative, and to them, I don't know if they know that conservative is a different movement. They just might think they're more lenient, so it can be destructive here. Okay, let me just see in the Rambam here. He uses the word miyad.
So what was the hook on which you were saying that point?
The hook on which I was saying that point is you push them away until you give them a chance to think it over and determine for themselves what their intent is, and you determine what their intent is. But then after that, you accept them immediately. You don't delay them.
Okay, and no, okay, so that you don't have a situation like the one you were talking about.
Right. Yeah, hold on. Does he say this? Yeah, this is how the Rambam expresses it. So he says, when you tell them halacha and the punishments, ein marbin alav, don't go excessively into the halachos and the punishments. Vein medaktin alav, and don't be too exacting. Shema yigrum lo latardo ulahatosu miderech tova laderech ra. Maybe you will cause them to be burdened and to turn them from a good path to an evil path. Initially, you should draw a person in with words of favor that are soft. As it says in Hosea, I don't know the context here. With the cords of a person, I will draw him in, and with cords of love. So this is the Rambam talking about, even when you're telling them halacha, don't turn them into a bad path. They're in a good direction right now. And even though you need to be sure that everyone knows what they're getting themselves into, you should not push him to a bad path. So that's why Naomi accepted her immediately once she saw that she was serious. And again, I think my whole polemic in the last year was like, people think that you're supposed to davka push away a convert. And that's not how it works. Yeah, Tamar?
This is reminding me of a shiur from Rabbi Chait that I didn't actually listen to, but I heard over from my dad. I'll say it really quick because I think it's like a parallel idea, which is that with a navi, you're supposed to test them until you're sure, and then it's usher to test them anymore.
Yeah,
I think it's the same kind of thing where with the navi, it's that you're supposed to sort of test them to your intellectual satisfaction, but then if you do extra, that's
right. It's a similar structure, correct? Yeah,
that you're supposed to, I guess, check that this person sort of knows what they're getting into and similar things like that. But then not more, because that's just pushing them away.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's a good comparison. Okay, let's go into the next one. Okay, so those are the only two Toalos he says in the first two chapters. Okay, second chapter has a ton. Okay, I know there's 16 total. We'll see how many we get through today. Second one, very short one, is Toalos Hashlishi. You notice he's not categorizing them here. He's just listing them. That it's proper for a person to have a alacrity to produce or find what he needs at a time when he's able to find it and not be lazy. Hello, tira, what does it say here in English? To inform that a person should be diligent in securing what they need when the opportunity arises and not be lazy about it. Hello, tira, don't you see? Ma shakara larus. mipnei charitusa. You see what happened to Ruth because of her diligence. Le'egor ma'achala umachal chamosa ba'is shetimsa. To gather her food and the food of her mother-in-law at a time when she could find it. To the point where at the very immediately when the harvest of the barley season came, the barley harvest season came, she strove to gather the sheaves, acharei hakotrim, behind the reapers. V'haisa shokedes al zeh, and she was diligent about this. Kamosha siper zeh, shasiper zeh shavsa habayis. Okay, I think this is quoting a zeh shavsa habayis me'at uba sham b'boker v'lakta ad ha'erev. I just want to see what this is referring to here. Yeah, it says I think this is what he's referring to, maybe. Vatalaki basade ad ha'arev. So she came there early. Does it say boker also? Yeah. Vatomer elakata nav el safti v'omarim achrei hakotrim vatavo vatomon me'az haboker. So she came in the morning and she was there until the evening. So she was like gathering all day, so it shows her zeal. Okay. Yeah. So this is a Mishlaic idea, right? So what would you say the Mishlaic idea is? I mean, the practical idea is you should collect when it's available, right? But what's the Mishlaic idea? If you could put it in more like conceptual terms. Yeah, Tamar?
I have a question first.
Yeah.
I kind of always thought that they were gathering what they needed sort of urgently because they needed food. And so I guess I'm wondering what the other option was besides for diligently gathering at the time that it was available.
Right. It's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. I mean, there are definitely people who are going to gather. I mean, the very fact that they needed food could make them gather just enough for them to satisfy their desire and then not gather more for the future, So that could be one thing. Another thing could be out of laziness, they'll gather today and say, oh, there'll be more tomorrow, but then they won't be diligent in getting it then, So what isn't there an English proverb about this? Something while the sun is make hay while the sun is shining, I think, So I guess, okay. Anyone have any Mishlei ideas? I think it's going to get clear when I give them my Mishlei idea, but so maybe it's just because I taught this pasuk this year, but I think of the pasuk in Mishlei 10:3, 10:5. Ogir bakayit bein maskil, nirdam bakatyu ben mevish. One who gathers in the summer is an intelligent son, but one who is fast asleep at the harvest is a shameful son. Okay, or you could say the other way around, that an intelligent son gathers in the summer, but a shameful son is fast asleep at the harvest. So the idea there, the way I explained it, is that there is this, the lazy person is the person who wants to avoid immediate pain and conflict at all costs, and they have a compulsion to do so. So there is this tendency in laziness to think that reality will accommodate itself to your schedule, but in actual reality, there are windows of opportunity that open and then close, and they open and close independently of when it's convenient for you. So I think the other thing that people could do is they could say, yeah, it is the beginning of the barley season, like I'm going to go get my barley, but there's abundance and it's not going to get depleted. But in reality, yeah, once the harvesters are done, and they gather up all the sheaves, or other poor people come and they gather the sheaves, there's not going to be any left for you. So I think there's a fantasy. It's not a rational. I don't know, Tamar, if your question was premised on what's the rational havamina, but that's how laziness works. Is it fabricates havaminas and leads her to believe that there will be some for me later, And so she might just not be diligent. I think you're right that she's definitely going to collect enough to eat tonight, but she might not work all day, to get what she's going to need for the future.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I think the facts are a little different from what I was imagining.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I'm guessing at the facts. So if you have an alternative, realistic reading for the facts, then let me know and maybe you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just even the very basic, just the fact that she was there from morning till evening.
Yeah.
It just could have been described with different parameters.
Right. That's true. Right.
These
Yeah,
are
and I
the
think that's probably
parameters,
what
the
the Ralbag.
entire possible time.
Right, right. I think that's how where the Ralbag is getting it from is like, why did the pasuk go out of its way to specify that? And that really is highlighting her diligence. Also, I should mention that one of the tricks of a lazy person is you underestimate your own laziness. Like let's say today you say, okay, I know this is the first day of the harvest, but I'll do it tomorrow. So what you're doing is you are imagining that even though you aren't in the mood to do it today, somehow magically you're going to get in the mood to do it tomorrow. But if you weren't in the mood to do it today, what makes you think that you're going to be in the mood to do it tomorrow? So like that's another mistake that lazy people make, and she didn't give into that. Another thing also that I want to mention is that I just taught my Eishes Chayil unit to my high schoolers, and you have to remember the only woman in Tanakh who's called an Eishes Chayil is Ruth. Now it's possible that Ruth is being called that for some other reason, but diligence and lechem atzlus lo sochel, she does not eat the bread of laziness. That is a feature of the Eishes Chayil. So this maybe that's another thing that's prompting the Ralbag to like comment on this, that to highlight her Mishlaic qualities. Okay. Third Toalos. Toalos Arvi Hulahodia Hamiskarev El Hashem Isparach Yatzlichu Inyanav. Someone who draws close to Hashem will succeed in their affairs. Halotira Ich Sibik Hashem Isparach Lahatzliach Rus Ad Shekavar Nasas Nises Leshofet Meashoftim V'Zachsa Lios Mizara Malchus Al Yisrael Lenetzach. Okay, so you see how Hashem arranged the causes so that, what they say, orchestrated. That's nice. That Ruth would succeeded in marrying a judge, one of the judges, and merited for her offspring to have monarchy over Israel, Lenetzach, forever. This is the fact that David came from her. Asher nasna lo hamalucha bris melach, that he gave the everlasting covenant of kingship to David. Okay. So, this is something that sounds like just generic, like Skarba Onesh, okay? But I think that there is a rhetorical point from seeing this particular success story, right? What do you see? What is, I guess, dramatic about Ruth's story? Yeah, Tamar?
I think her like, she had the minimum possible lineage, which was just herself, and right. She wasn't prominent and she was poor. So to have a king come from that is a complete reversal. Exactly. This is a real, like metaphysical rags to riches story, right? That she was a Moabite, okay, which is not the furthest you can get from Israel, because they are related to us, right? In the sense of they come from Lot, and Lot is was Avram's nephew. And we do have halachos that actually are predicated on the fact that they are related, or a relative nation, okay? But culturally, they were very far from us, and she had no connection to the Jewish people, but she drew close. And she gets the best marriage and the best zechus in her offspring, which has eternal, lasting, huge ramifications, not just for Klal, but for all of humanity. The Melech HaMashiach is going to descend from her, So it really is like, there are people who are down on themselves because of their origin, how can I get so far? Like, I'm just a lowly non-Jew, or in her case, she had a failed marriage to a sinful husband who died and left her a widow, and without a childless widow. You could easily say, like, she's not going to make amount to anything. But when you draw close to Hashem, never underestimate how much Hashem can do for you. And I'm only thinking about this because we did the Toalos on Esther. I mean, it is interesting that in terms of the lot she got for her family, it did end up being way better than Esther, right? Esther ended up being married to Achashverosh and had a son who was a Persian king, and had to live with Achashverosh the rest of her life. Ruth gets the best marriage and has a successful lineage, So it's not a guarantee, is my point, but the sky is the limit, in terms of like what Hashem can do. So I think that has a rhetorical punch. And this is something, look, I mean, this is something, again, having talked to Gerim, I do think that it is a thing that a Ger feels like they're intrinsically limited, by the fact that they came from outside of the nation. And you see, all you need to do is point to Rus and see how good this is. And Jews are bigoted, a lot of Jews are bigoted against people who come from the outside. And you see that Rus, I don't know what the Sephardim do who reject Gerim, the Syrians, I mean,
But they have to contend with the fact that Rus was a Giores, and they would have kicked her out of their schools and out of their and discriminated against her. But what would have happened to Klal Yisrael if Boaz did the same thing? Okay, yeah, Esty.
Also, I just think it's interesting that her success was not a public success. It wasn't something that was like, I mean, we know about her because Tanakh tells us about her.
Right.
But this was something very private that she was doing that wasn't meant to be a, like just defining what success is.
Right.
Is something,
Yeah.
not specifically public.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Is that yeah, we would not have known about this if I think according to the Masorah, then Shmuel wrote this down. But we publicized this to show to show this idea. Okay. Hatolas hachamishi hu lahodia shiroi lehisrachik adam milikichas matanos mimisha tera enobo. So this is telling you that you should person should distance himself from accepting gifts from someone who's stingy about him or about it. The af al pi she'en lebal hamatanos zchusba, even though the bal hamatanos, which I guess is the giver, has no rightful claim over the matanos, kamo ha'inyan b'matanos aniyim, just like with gifts to the poor. Ki Torah chayva habailin la'azovosam la'aniyim. The Torah obligates the owners of the field to abandon the sheaves for the poor and the corners and all these other things. V'zeh ki yihye siba im lo yasig ha'ani muvukasho kishi yidaktiku habalim lishmor b'tachlis mash efshar shelo yipol lapolim mihashibolim k'dei shelo yimtza davar o yeh siba lahachti habalim lahachzik b'matana hahi v'yimne ha'ani milakichasa im shehu mavur sheroyal hishamar milasos kneged ratzon hanashim kishelo yaviu lezeh ha'hechreach. Okay, I am going to read the English just because that was a long sentence. This is because it might cause the poor person to not obtain what they need if the owners meticulously ensure that nothing falls to the ground for the poor to gather, or it might cause the owners to sin by holding on to those gifts, preventing the poor from taking them. Okay. It is evident that one should avoid acting against people's wishes unless it is absolutely necessary. That's why Ruth says, let me glean among the ears of grain after someone in whose eyes I find favor. Okay. So in terms of the story, the facts are all of the agricultural gifts are open for Ruth to gather from, and the owners don't own them, and Ruth is entitled to gather from them. But she davka picked someone who it would be favorable in their eyes for her to gather from, because she knew that just because it's legally permitted does not mean that it's going to end up well, because it could be that the owner is going to be stingy with what they, to make sure nothing drops, or is going to be stingy about like illegally hold on to this, or is going to give her a hard time, So it's funny also, if you read this in light of the first Toalos, where we made the distinction between like, legal conversion and like philosophical conversion. There's a big difference also between like having the a legal matana or legal rights, and like, is this something that is that the person is on board with, and so just because something is allowed does not mean that you should take advantage of it. And look, this is a principle in halacha in general. Just because something is mutter doesn't mean it's good for you, and just because it's and just because even if the person is chayiv to do it does not mean that it's good, that it's going to turn out well. So this is a mishleic lesson. In other words, don't make the letter of the law into the ikr. Look at the person and see like what their attitude is, and then act mishleically in terms of deciding whether this is really someone who you want to get into a relationship with in terms of like taking from their field. Yeah, Tamar?
I think this is a really widely applicable lesson that I think is interesting. Like, even just there are so many cases where you can be technically right, but it's not going to be worth it to push for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Hold on. I might have an example. I just want to think about whether I should say it. Yeah, no. I mean, I think this is especially important in a very litigious culture like America, where, or is that the opposite idea? Hold on. It's funny. It's kind of a mixture, right? Is that in America, there are a lot of things that are by default allowed, but if the person is stingy or jealous or something like that, they could start up with you and make it into a legal issue. I think that's just like an expression of the same idea. Yeah. Right. Okay, good. This is another example of going lifnei mishur sadin, of going beyond the letter of the law, but for mishlaic purposes, not necessarily for character development purposes. Okay. This is a funny one. Hatolas hashishi hu lahodia shiroi la'adam shiyachtim shalom l'chol adam vafilu hu avdo o schiro. That it's proper that a person should preemptively greet every person, even if it is his servant or his worker. Halotira ki Boaz hiktim shalom l'kotzrim asher lo. You see that Boaz greeted the reapers first. So this is what I just gave a shir on Wednesday night and this morning. Boaz said, Hashem imachem, may Hashem be with you, and they responded, Yivarechecha Hashem. And these were just his workers, you know. So this is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which we have not learned because I think it's in the second chapter, or maybe it's in the first chapter. Let me just show you the Mishnah. I think it's Shammai. Wait. Makdim? Yeah, I forgot the Lashon. Or maybe it's not in the first chapter. Maybe it's in the third chapter. Oh, Savor Panim Yafos, right? Savor Panim Yafos, that's what it is. Okay, let me just, sorry. There's two similar statements. I don't remember which one it is. There we go. Shame Omer. I thought there's one that says Makdim Shalom L'chol Adam. Hold on, this is going to bug me. Oh, yeah, there we go. It is later on in our parak. Rabbi Yanai Omer, Ein bi'adinu lo mishal. Okay, heavy makdim shalom b'shalom kol adam. You should greet every person first, okay, or inquire into their welfare. And I think Rashi says, afilu legoy b'shuk, even a non-Jew in the marketplace, okay. And as you know, the Rambam says there are zechuyos and avonos. There are merits and demerits in people, in societies, and in the world. And one of the demerits in New York is that people don't do this. And one of the merits in certain other places, like in the West Coast or Hawaii, is that people greet each other. And so I still try to do this here. And the trick I found is capitalizing on mirror neurons. Is if you smile and greet them, they usually have an automatic reaction of smiling back, even if they don't want to, you know, and then that leads to positive greetings. And so, you know, there are lots of reasons for this. Again, it's a whole Mishnah. And I'm sure when we get to this Bli Neder, then we'll explore that. But it is interesting that, like, you know, the Megillah goes out of its way to show that Boaz, despite how, you know, prominent he was, he greeted his workers who were just like these lowly people. I guess according to the Ralbag, to teach us this midah. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on this? Yeah, Ayala.
Just a general question, not specifically on this.
Yeah.
But I'm not. Where is it from that Megilas Esther is like a book about Megilas Chasadim? And it's interesting that the Ralbag doesn't mention that at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Where did I read this? I think I read it in someone's Hakdama. Let me just see if it was the Sforno. No Hakdama. Actually, you know what? Easy place to look is, okay, for those who don't know, I don't know how much I look at this. So if you look, you know, on all Torah encyclopedios, this is the Aspakalaria, which is the Hashkafa encyclopedia. So go here and go to Rus. A lot of Rebbe's. Rus. Chesed. I'm just looking for if there's a statement. Yeah, here we go. So statement in Rus Rabbah. Wait. No. Oh, yeah. I don't know where the statement is from. I think it's Rus. Yeah, I'm not. Oh, yeah, Midrash Rabbah, right? Midrash Rabbah, Rus Tesvav. It says, I just lose it. Oh yeah, here we go. Amar Rabbi Zera, Megillah zo ein ba lo tuma v'lo tara, v'lo iser v'lo heter. So this Megillah has no halacha in it, right? Neither tuma nor tara nor iser v'heter. Lama nichtava, why was it written? Lo lamedecha kama schar tov legomle chasadim, to teach you how much reward there is for people who are gomel chasad. Okay, so yeah, that's a good call that this is probably part of that. But that's where the Gemara comes from. Oh, that's where the statement comes from. What does it mean? That's a good question.
Is there a lot of halacha about Jairus in here?
That's a good question. I mean, again, it's unclear to me whether what we're actually learning out from this or what's being used as an asmachta. For example, if you take this, for example, and you compare it to Megilas Esther actually institutes halacha. There's actually like mitzvos in there, and certain areas in the Nevi'im, like a kavod and onik Shabbos, seem to be like spelled out there. Ruth might be asmachta. Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that. Okay. So again, there's a lot here, but I feel like to take this up as its own topic, we should learn that Mishnah, and I'm not really in the mood to go into that right now. I want to do that in earnest. Okay. Hatoalos ha-shavi'i hu lohodia shehu roy sheyidaktiku ha'adam b'shmiras nechasav v'kinyanav. This is teaching that a person should be meticulous with guarding his property and his possessions. V'im yiskor polim sheyeshiv imahem. If he hires workers to sit with them, kadeshi yasu malachtam, to do their work, karoi, properly, o yamid sham adam b'mkomo lahashgiach b'malachas apolim, or to set up like someone who's supervising the work of the workers, lazarzam shiasu malachtam karoi, and to encourage them to do their work properly. Lazet timsa shesiper shekvar leboaz. Sorry, Shahai LeBoaz Nar Nitzav al Kotrim. So you see that Boaz had a youth. I don't think this is literally a youth, but meaning a what's the other word? A guy. He hired a guy to stand over the harvesters. V'timsa Gamkein Shebe'es Shazara Hasaorim Shaka Boaz Begoren Lishmor Ha'arma Shalo Yignavu Mimena. And also when they were winnowing the barley, Boaz slept in the granary, in the threshing floor, to guard the pile, the pile, shelo yignavu mimeno, so that they don't steal from him. Ki kvar yitachin lahem ligno mimeno. It's possible for a person to for them to steal from a person, v'lo yukar, and to not recognize it. Ulazos hasiba gam kain zachar ki Rus lakta ad ha'erev. That's also why it mentions that Rus gathered until the evening. Vim kozeh mihara lachbot asher lakata lahavi el ha'ir kadesha lo yignov la mi asher lakata. And it's so even though she gleaned until the evening, she threshed what she had gleaned so that she could bring it to the city so it wouldn't be stolen. Because presumably when you thresh it, it's easier to transport the grain outside of the stalks than the grain that's in the stalks. Yeah. Okay. So what's up with it? Again? This seems like another Mishlaic thing, right? So what do we want to say about this? That guarding against theft. Right? And it seems like common sense, right? Yeah, Ayala?
About like the middle thing that he was saying about how you should like be encouraging your workers. I feel like it's interesting, like a point that you should like create a atmosphere and environment of like diligence among people who are working under you and like holding them responsible and accountable.
Okay, that's really good. Right. Is it's not enough to in other words, this is not just for the sake of the individual guy who's prone to being lazy, but having an environment where there is a seriousness that you convey the fact that we care about this, about people like being diligent, is that's definitely a benefit. I want to give an example, but I'm not going to record it. Oh, so I forgot the chat. Sorry. Let me pause this and then see what the chat said. Pause recording. Okay, that's a good idea. Any other ideas on this? I feel like there is another thing also where when a person is successful, there is definitely a feeling that my success is going to last forever, or my success is intrinsic, or my success is immune to any diminishment. I mean, you see this most clearly in those slow motion YouTube videos of like someone thinks that they won the marathon or something like that, and they start cheering before they actually won it, and then the other person like goes and like finishes in first place ahead of them. Where like there, you celebrate and you feel like, okay, it's in the books. but just because you got success does not mean that the success will keep. So I feel like there's a fantasy that attaches to success that this is going to be forever. And one of the manifestations of that fantasy is going to be that you're going to lower your guard and think that people can't steal from you. And so that's one of the things that, that Boaz was guarding against. And similarly with Ruth, I'm entitled to this stuff. So of course I'm going to take it. No one's going to take it from me because this is my right, and nope, it's not your right. Like people can steal, people can commit crimes against anyone. So even against someone who is entitled and poor and disadvantaged. Yeah, Esty.
I think also it's interesting. You can have like both friendly greeting people, valuing people, even if you're a gadol and they're, so to speak, poor people. And you can have both contradictory things at the same time. You treat everybody
that's a good point.
Humanly and respectfully, but also you need to be on guard because people might steal. You could have both.
That's a good point. And yeah, and that does emerge nicely from the fact that he gives these two examples. Here's another example of the Rus thing. I mean, I'm not judging people for being poor or homeless, but I am judging them for not being mishleic, is when you see poor people in the city with, let's say, like a collection thing, or like a backpack, and they're sleeping next to it, as opposed to sleeping holding it or it wrapped around them. I mean, again, I see this most when I used to go to Hawaii, where there's a lot of homeless people. It's going to get stolen. There are homeless people all around and they're going to steal from each other. So like, it's, do you really care that little about your possessions that you're just going to like be careless about how you sleep? Like you should see that in the culture, like, and so, I think that's a thing. Yeah. Esty.
I know that during the war, when Joey's father was on the run, he had a backpack and he had some things in it. Every night he slept on his stomach, on top of his knapsack, because everybody was stealing whatever they could. Unfortunately, sometimes he was so tired. He said one time somebody turned him over during the night.
Wow.
And cut off his backpack, and he was so tired he didn't notice. But in general, that was how they did it.
Yep.
That was what they did.
Yep. Okay, that's good. Okay, next one. Hatolas Hashemini. Hulo dia sheroy leisha kishititzarach lalechas bein ha'anashim shetiena ima nashim beofen shelo tasigena chashad erva. So it is fitting that when a woman needs to go among men, that she have other women with her so that she does not get accused of inappropriate sexual behavior. Loze amar Boaz l'Rus v'chosid bakun imna arosai. Thus you should cling to my maidens. V'zos raya shehi davka tchila imna arosav lamalit nafsha mina chashad. So in other words, he's saying you should continue to cling. No, sorry, maybe that's not. I just want to read how Neema Novetsky translates this. Did I already click away from Rus? Tid Bakun. 8. Boaz said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field and do not pass from you. You shall stay here close to my maidens. So I guess here. Okay, fine. So I guess Ralbag is saying that she already was doing this, and then Boaz like reinforced it. Right. V'zos raya, this is a proof. She davka tchila imna rosav l'malit nafshe min chashad. This shows that she was extracting herself from suspicion. Yeah. Right. So again, maybe this is you might say that this is a common sense, but it's the way of thinking, right? The common sense thing is not putting herself in a dangerous situation where she will get sexually assaulted, because that was definitely a concern. But this is even distancing herself from chashad, from impropriety, And again, I'll use this example. I've used it before, but working for 10 years in an all-girls school as a male, then I deliberately took measures to distance myself from any suspicion, and so anything from not having being obviously not halachic yichud, but like not even being in a situation where the door is closed, or certainly not texting students privately, And even when any student would say anything that could remotely be perceived as flirtatious, I would immediately put on stony face and then go and report it to my principal so that she knows that like I'm vigilant about this and not like lending any like credence to this, and then not giving any students, certainly not giving any students rides in my car, even students who I know. I mean, I remember very early on when someone in our community had a daughter at Shalhavet and asked if they could pay me to give her a ride home. I said, no, I'm sorry, I have to keep an across the board policy of not giving any female, well, I also do this for male students, but not giving any female student a ride in my car, under any circumstances, so like distancing yourself from chashad, from suspicion, is a certain way of thinking mishleikly, where like, if there's any suspicion that this could, that someone could like spin this into something bad, then you have to like distance yourself from that. So that's what Ruth was trying to do. Yeah, Esty typed in the chat, isn't that also why he told her to go home before dawn? Correct. Right. Is to go home before dawn so that people don't see her leaving Boaz's house and think that she's taking a walk of shame, from some sexual like thing, in the night. Yeah. Okay. Let's go onward. I think we can try to finish this. You can see that there's not that much left here. And one of them is my favorite one, which will be very short. Okay, you'll see. When a person sees that another person wants to benefit them a lot, and doesn't know the reason why, mihu, it's proper to make known who it is. Because maybe the other person made a mistake. I want to read this in English. To inform that when a person sees someone who seems very eager to help them and they do not know the reason, they should inquire about it, as the other person might be mistaken and think that they owe them a favor. Okay, so that's interesting. There's going to be a mix-up here. You see from here that Ruth already heard the reason. She said, why have I found favor in your eyes? To distinguish me. I'm a foreign woman. She thought maybe Boaz thought that she was someone else, and that's why he was like showing all these favors to her. And maybe she thought maybe that he thought that he was obligated to benefit her. To the point where until he answered her, he says, no, I know who you are. And so he says, no, I'm benefiting you because of the kindness that you did to Naomi, who's a relative of mine. Okay, yeah, right. So in other words, you don't want to get okay, well, I'll give you a dramatic example of this. Is and maybe some of you know who this is, but I won't mention the name. Is that some friends of mine got a long, heartfelt thank you note in the in the mail, I think, or maybe it was an email, from someone who is a recipient who thanked them for a gift of thousands of dollars that they made, for this great chesed that they did, and my friends did not give thousands of dollars, and they were in a situation where it was awkward because, like, if they inform this person, then they're going to be very embarrassed, because it was like a very personal thing. But ultimately, I forgot how it resolved, but like, I know what they decided is like, no, we have to like tell them that this was not us, you're getting it mixed up. And I think what happened was like, it was a similar last name or something like that. And so it was two things, is that like, the person who this recipient was trying to thank didn't end up getting thanked, and now this recipient feels indebted to like people who didn't actually give them this thing. So there was a mix-up, and it could lead to like ill feelings and breaking of shalom and all that other stuff. So you got to make sure, when you see someone doing this huge benefit, like, you should make sure that they got the right person. Yeah, it's funny, people do this in you see this in movies and TV shows where like someone wins a contest and they're like, I think you got the wrong person. Yeah. Okay, any other ideas here that you see? I mean, look, you do see another thing. There is a mentality, a Mishlei fool would just gobble it up. Free cash, free benefits here, and not even think about the consequences, And look, let's say this was rightly to belonging to someone else. That person might come after you and say, "Why are you taking this stuff? This is rightfully mine." So you do have to be careful here and think mishleically, even when you get this benefit. Okay, next. Hatolas Asir, the 10th benefit, is hulo dia shehu roya ligmol chesed lemishagam lehu lo o lekarovov. I'm going to actually just switch to English just to make this go faster. It is to inform you that you should repay kindness to those who have done good to them or their relatives. Look at how Boaz, because of his kindness, the kindness that Ruth had shown to Naomi, who was his relative's wife, was moved to do all the kindness mentioned in the Megillah for this Megillah for Ruth. He even went to great lengths to help her without making her feel ashamed, instructing his men to leave extra grain for her to glean. He did all of this because of the kindness that she had shown to Naomi, as it is recounted, along with the goodness she showed in coming to take refuge under the wings of Hashem. For this reason, Naomi was moved by the kindness Ruth had shown her and always sought to find a place of rest and prosperity for Ruth, advising her on how to marry Boaz. Okay, so this is a good example also. In addition to just, normal Hakaras Tov, this is a good example of like a virtuous circle that like Ruth did this kind of act for Naomi of like escorting her back and then converting to Judaism and sticking with it. And then that led to Boaz benefiting Ruth, and that led to Naomi getting more benefit, and then Naomi giving benefit to Ruth again, and then having her marry Boaz, which was good for them, and it ended up being good for Klal Yisrael. So, like, that's the nature of Tov, is that when you do acts of good for someone, it creates this reciprocity of good that just keeps on building and building and building. So it's not just a good middos thing, it's a good beneficial result in society thing that compounds. And good middos, obviously. But I think he's emphasizing the benefits that each of them got as a result of this. Okay. Here comes my favorite Toalos. The 11th benefit is to inform that vinegar is beneficial in hot times, as it has advantages as quenching thirst, strengthening the stomach, and combating spoilage. Thus, Boaz said to her, "Dip your bread in the vinegar," as we have mentioned. Okay, so let's just look at this pasuk inside. Okay, Boaz says in pasuk 2:14, "Vayomer la Boaz." Boaz said to her, "La'esa ochel." At the time of eating, gishi halom ba'achadamin alechem, come here and eat from the bread. V'tavalta pitich bachometz, and dip your bread in vinegar. Vateshev mitzad kotrim and she sat beside the reapers, and he handed her some roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied, and she left over. Okay, so the question is, why is the Megillah mentioning vinegar? Must be to teach you a health benefit, that vinegar cools you off, and it quenches your thirst and strengthens your stomach, and it combats spoilage. Now, I think a lot of this was based on outdated Galenic medicine, but you see that it's important, okay? So I always think that the minhag should be on Shavuos to serve not dairy, because that's not mentioned anywhere in the Megillah, but to serve vinegar, because it's mentioned in the Megillah. And I think even if you hold that some of these benefits are not true, I mean, I don't know what the benefits of vinegar are. Maybe I'll read an article before Shavuos. But like, you see that this is a form of chesed also, is he's giving her food that's not just like staples, but like he's trying to alleviate her thirst, and he's trying to make her healthy, and he's trying to like, he's I don't know, teaching her good usages of vinegar, So again, this is an example of like a very funny Ralbag Toalos. Yeah, Ayala?
It reminds me of also like the Ashes Chayil who's getting like linen and like warm clothes for her kids and things like that to like also
comfort,
adjust their psychology needs.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so that's the vinegar Toalos. I remember reading this. I was like, this was when I first asked, like, what is he doing in these Toalos? And look, I bet there are many more chesed things that you can choose, but he chooses this one. Okay, another short one. The 12th one is to inform that when someone gives a portion to someone who is embarrassed to ask for more, even if what they have given is insufficient, they should give enough to make it clear that it is sufficient. Thus, it is mentioned that Boaz gave Ruth roasted grain, enough for her to eat, to be satisfied, and have some left over, right? So that's like the Akashverosh lesson also, is you should preempt your guests' needs. So give enough for them to eat and more so that they don't have to ask, yeah, Esty?
That's always like part of like my calculations for whenever we have guests, because I always want there to be just a little bit left over.
Yeah.
Because if there wasn't, then I don't know if it was enough.
I know. I'm the same way. And like, I used to wonder why my mom made so much food, for every Shabbos meal. And then when I started hosting, then I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be in a situation where people are gonna either not have enough or be like think that they're being inconsiderate by like getting enough.
Right. Mostly that, like
Yeah,
nobody wants to take the last piece, and that
exactly.
piece is sitting there, even though everybody wanted it.
Right. Yeah. There's only one other strategy that I give, which is I think this is acceptable as well, is if you make discrete quantities of things where like each person gets one, like when I make, let's say, chicken
Yes,
thighs.
the plating strategy.
Right, the plating strategy, right, exactly. Although you have to make sure that your plating is enough, in total. Because I've definitely been at houses before where they plated and then you're like, I'm still hungry. And if this was like I could take more, then I would ask for more, but like they plated it, so I don't know if I can ask, But yeah, but again, this is more about the method of thinking about your guests, and it's a level of halachas orchim where you're trying to anticipate their psychological needs and their psychological feelings about benefiting from you.
Right? They
Okay.
should be comfortable and feel like they weren't impinging, that there was
Exactly,
an abundance
right.
that they got.
Right. And look, there are ways to do this verbally also. It's like to say, like, if you want anything, then then ask, and like, and I mean it, or like there are ways to like to verbally convey this. Okay. The 13th benefit is to inform that if it is possible for a person to achieve an extraordinary benefit through an action that requires a bit of boldness, they should not forego that benefit out of embarrassment. Okay, so this is the flip side, right? Rather, they should minimize the boldness as much as possible. Thus, you see that Ruth did not refrain from doing what Naomi told her, to go lie down at Boaz's feet. Instead, she did it discreetly so that no one would know, and she did it in a way that Boaz would not notice her arrival during the night. She also guarded her modesty by not sleeping, but immediately responding wisely and intelligently when Boaz asked who she was, not in a manner of someone who's rudely awakened. Okay, now, it's hard to go into this too in depth without analyzing the story and saying, what was she doing? Why did Naomi tell her to go sleep at Boaz's feet? And why was she doing it? And like, what did Boaz think? So we're not going to get into that analysis. That we have to look at the Megillah. But I think just this first benefit, that if you are going to do something that is a bit brazen, and you have to do it, doesn't mean you should be totally brazen. You should find like discreet ways to do it and minimize the brazenness, because again, I think it could be an insult to the kavod of the person who you're doing it for, or it can jeopardize your ability to get the benefit if they like think that you're being sketchy by doing this, or it can be misperceived by other people, and so again, thinking about all the angles systemically and in terms of your interpersonal relationships to make sure that you're like covering all your bases and creating. I think the message I'm getting from here is, when it comes to chesed, create the smoothest pipeline for a back and forth flow of tov as possible, without obstruction and without miscommunication and without creating additional obstacles and without creating additional chashad or stumbling blocks. Yeah, Tamar?
I think it's also interesting, like, this I think is a real difference between like the way of chachma and like other ways of handling things, where like you could say, oh, I'm going to either do this or I'm not going to do it because I'm too embarrassed. And instead what you can do is like decide to do it because it makes sense. And then, considering your embarrassment, to like figure out how to do it in the best way, like to look at the nuances as opposed to just like thinking of it as like flipping a switch, like I'm either bold or embarrassed.
Exactly right. I think part of this issue is that in a lot of cultures, there is like an autopilot etiquette, that either you are following the rules or like you have to like break it, or it's not a like you said, it's like it's not an engaging in the etiquette with chachma. That even when etiquette allows or disallows something, you have to go about it with chachma to get the best results, and also for the sake of preserving like these values in the society. Okay. Oop. I forgot to copy and paste this one. I'm reading in yeah, I just forgot to copy and paste the Hebrew here. Okay, so actually, I'm just gonna do this because otherwise I'm gonna forget it. Rus, we're up to 14 in the Toalos. Oh, again, for those who have not heard my announcement, Allah Torah has all the dates and the locations. So Ralbag is 1288 to 1234, so 1244 in Provence. So I should get into the habit of vocalizing them when I read them. That would be good for everyone also. We're up to 14. Okay. The fourth benefit is to inform that when someone asks for a favor, it is appropriate for the asker to make it seem as if they are giving something to the one they're asking. It's appropriate for the asker to make it seem as if they're giving something to the one who they're asking. This appeases the person's heart and removes the embarrassment of the request, especially if it is necessary that the request not be granted immediately, not because of the person's reluctance, but for another reason. For example, if it is said that it is more appropriate for another person to do this, it might lead the requester to think that the person refuses their request and thus feel dejected and embarrassed. Therefore, you find that since it was not Boaz's place to fulfill Ruth's request, unless it became clear that the closer redeemer would not redeem, it would have caused Ruth great distress if he had told her this directly. So this was the situation, is that they needed a goel, a redeemer, which I'm not going to get into what that is. And really there was a relative, Ploni Almoni, who was closer to Ruth. And even though Boaz was a relative, he was further away. So he could not accept this role without first going to Ploni Almoni. Okay. Especially since Ruth had approached this through a somewhat bold method, she might think that Boaz was rejecting her request. So Boaz first said that she had done a great kindness to his relatives by making this request, implying that he was greatly indebted to her for this. He promised to fulfill her request, but explained that there was a closer redeemer. If he would not redeem, then Boaz swore he would redeem her. To further show his eagerness to fulfill her request and to do good to her, Boaz rose early in the morning and generously gave her 6 measures of barley to ease her mind until the matter could be clarified. So the main point, in my own words, is if someone asks for something, then if you, the giver or the would-be giver, have to respond, you should respond in a way that minimizes embarrassment as much as possible, even if you have to delay or even, I'd say, reject their request, and take care to be sensitive in that area. Now, this is where we could use a really good example, because this example in Ruth is kind of, is kind of elaborate. Oh, I'll give an example. Yeah, Ayala, go ahead.
I remember in a recent episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast, I think someone was discussing how to say no.
I was just thinking of that example, but I forgot what it was.
No, yes.
Yeah.
I forgot who it was also. But yeah, I've like tried to implement it, and I feel like, and when people do it to me, I notice, and
yeah, right. Making like a no sandwich. You say yes in a way, and you affirm them and affirm your esteem for them. You say no to the actual request, and then you say yes to something else that you can do. So that's a good example. I'll give you another example. Okay, and I'm going to strategically pause the recording in a certain way. So I think I gave this example in a Mishlei Shir.
It looks here like it's still recording. It's not.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm gonna strategically pause it at a certain point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was informed that that this coming week at in West Hartford, at the Young Israel of West Hartford, that the rabbi of the shul is going to be. I mean, this is not a surprise, but he was going to be starting his sorry, I didn't know this. Okay, the rabbi of the shul asked me at the Nija dinner, would I be willing to basically come in for Shavuos and take over Shavuos learning programming? Okay, and I'll pause this. So then another teacher, independently, another teacher in the school texted me and said, the rabbi is starting his sabbatical before Shavuos, and usually there's NCSY that comes out and does teaching stuff, but like I think the region was dissolved or something like that, so they don't have NCSY for that region. And then Chabad usually comes out and does something, but Chabad couldn't do it, so they were in desperate need of someone to facilitate like a learning program. And he asked me independently if I'd be willing to come out and do that. Hold on just 1 second here. I'm gonna pause this. So I said that I have other plans, which I do. And I didn't consciously implement this, but I did not want to make him feel rejected. So what I did was I said, I do care about like what the kids, what the kids are going to be learning about. So, please follow up and let me know how it turns out. And then I followed up a week later and I checked back and I said, like, did you guys work out learning for Shavuos? And so he told me that they did work it out. There's some YU rabbis coming in, and he thanked me and said, it really means a lot to me that you care enough about the kids that you're willing to like check up on them. So I think it really has a lot to do with not wanting the other person to feel rejected and making it seem like you want to help, even if you can't. And so just finding ways to convey that sentiment is the target here. And that's what Boaz was doing. And also just helping as much as you can. Sometimes if you can't do something, then like telling some people like, oh, I'll be on the lookout for other people who might be able to like help you. Yeah, Steve?
I really, really like this point. Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's the help that the person wants, but the breach and the feeling of
Right.
the other person not caring or not valuing what's important to you
Right.
is as hurtful as the, not getting the help that you wanted.
Right. Exactly. And look, he is, Ralbag keeps mentioning this is the embarrassment. Putting yourself out there and saying I have a need is a vulnerable position to be in, and especially if you have to do it in a bold way, and so like I think it is I think it helps with that as well. Yeah, Esty. Oop. You were unmuted, but I can't hear you. I don't know if you changed something by accident in your audio, but I'm not hearing you. Still not hearing you. All right, I'm gonna go on.
Wait, is this?
Oh, now I can hear you.
Yeah, okay. I just took
Yeah.
off the Bluetooth. There's, I think,
Oh,
some kind of recommendation from Benjamin Franklin. Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, that he said that if you want someone to like you, ask them a favor. Because he said people, oh wait, now I'm forgetting the connection to what, to what you were saying. It was relevant.
Do you remember the piece of advice that he gave?
Yeah, the piece of advice was like if he had an enemy, he would go and ask if he could borrow a book.
Right.
Because
Right. So does that have to do with like them creating the connection of the like affirmation of the other person as like a human?
Oh, yes, and also in the reverse, the person who's asking usually feels diminished, so, and the person who's giving usually feels superior because that's just the way people are. So he would say, like, if you want to get along with somebody, do this because then they'll feel that way. So this is addressing that dynamic that just naturally happens when somebody asks something.
Right.
Is that you try to equalize it because just the act of asking for something does cause that kind of a sense of a relationship.
Yeah, right, definitely. I also want to give a personal example here, which is that, or another personal example, which is that that I try to extend this as an option when it comes to my Torah content, because I know that not everyone can afford to sponsor or to be a subscriber, a paid subscriber or a patron. But I do try to say, like, from time to time, if you can't support my content, but you appreciate it, just let me know, like, that you liked an article. Like, there are other ways to support. And I'm doing that partially for them to give them a way to support, but also for me, like, again, I have no idea how many people or who is listening to my stuff or reading my stuff. And like, it really means a lot to me when some random person or a friend who I don't know is connected at all to my Torah says, like, I really enjoy your articles, or I really like this particular idea. It is a way to, like, I am putting myself out there and saying, like, look, I'm kind of dependent on you guys for the ability to keep on doing this. And so, like, just hearing that these non-monetary ways of support does mean a lot, and it makes me feel less dejected and embarrassed. Okay, last two. Toalos HaChamisha Asar, the 15th benefit is to inform that the transaction of a sale or an exchange is completed when the buyer gives an item to the seller in the presence of witnesses. Once the buyer acquires the item, the seller can finalize the sale or exchange. That's a chalipin. Okay, and I guess that is a halacha that I think we do learn a lot from this. So I don't know what the Gemara means. Okay, that's a halacha point. We don't really need to dwell on that. And then the last one is the 16th benefit is to inform that for matters of marriage, it is appropriate to have 10 men present. Another halachic point. Thus, it is recounted that Boaz gathered 10 men. This was not because 10 were needed for the purpose of testimony, as the Torah states that 2 witnesses are sufficient for establishing a matter. Rather, the 10 men were needed to publicize the marriage and to receive the blessing of the elders. It appears that it was customary to bless the groom when he agreed to marry a woman, and it is evident that the blessings of the elders are more readily heard by Hashem, because it's a tzibor, because it's a community. Boaz was indeed blessed by their blessing, as from it came the progeny that would build the house of Israel and establish them in the utmost completeness with help of Hashem, as foretold by the prophets about the Messianic king who would come from David, who came from Ruth. May Hashem, in his mercy, bring him quickly so that we may see and bring close his counsel to release the prisoner from the dungeon and those who sit in darkness. Amen. Okay, that's the conclusion of the Megillah. Yeah, okay, so this is we learned that you should have a marriage among a community. I always thought that this was because, with the minyan, I always thought that this was because marriage in our religion is a binyan of the is building, we say building a bias net among the Israel. Is the bias is the smallest unit of the and you're building the nation when you get married. It's not just like marriage for romance or marriage for, like, tribal, peoplehood, where like as long as you have some people in your tribe, then that's fine. This is like, no, it's a tzibur idea. He's saying, he's not disagreeing with that, but he is saying that it is that for really the brachos, I guess the Sheva brachos, I mean, in our day, that are going to be have a greater impact if they are with a minyan. So that is an idea that merits learning the Sheva brachos, which I gave a shiur on last year in December, or maybe last year in January. But yeah, so that's another idea that like I think is its own sugya. Okay, so what are our impressions from the Ralbag's 16 Toalos on Megilas Rus? Now that we've done all of them, any concluding thoughts or overarching thoughts or methodological thoughts? Yeah, Ayala.
One thing that I was noticing, I mean, I think you were pointing out more this time than I noticed in the ones on Megilas Esther, was like what prompted him to say it. Like, let's say the vinegar, where like the pasuk includes something which is like extra, doesn't seem to be necessary.
Yeah, I think one of the differences, I think one of the reasons why it feels like I'm pointing this out is I think he did it more explicitly in a lot of the ones in Megilas Esther. I have to go back and check. But yeah, I think that is the derech, because it's very textually anchored in terms of what function does this serve in the pasuk. Yeah, who was the other hand? I saw the hand.
Oh, that was me.
Yeah.
It's just I find the whole as an aggregate just an interesting I don't know how to exactly explain it. It's
it is interesting.
It's like very odd. It's just like a very like eccentric. It's like an eccentric. I don't know what exactly the right word is.
The closest thing I've seen to this, and again, maybe this is on my mind because it's Rabbi Moskowitz's Yahrzeit week, is Rabbi Moskowitz's short story shiurim. That's what he would do. Is we would read short stories or novellas sometimes, and then he would say, okay, what's the idea? And he would get ideas out of it in the same way that Ralbag is doing here. Now, in a pasuk in Mishlei, Shlomo wrote it to convey ideas, like discrete ideas, But with the short stories, it was like, okay, we read the story. What ideas can you get out of it? That seems to be like the derech that the Ralbag is doing, and that's why there's such a variety and such a
so interesting. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think it is this derech can be applied to short stories or to other things. It's like an in-between stage of pshat and drush. None of this is drush. None of this is like taking the words of the pasuk and like spiraling out positing things, it is pshat, but you're not trying to get what the author's intent was. It's in the pshat, but it's not like I would not be confident in saying that when Shmuel Hanavi wrote this, he was trying to teach you that you should use vinegar on hot days. Yeah, Esty?
Yeah, I guess what's also striking me is that he had this relatively limited number, like no lessons from, let's say, when Naomi came back and she had been bitter, that people were greeting her at the baby, and I feel like there's just definitely lessons there. I don't know what they are, or things you could think about, but he didn't address those.
Right, correct. And I think that's a raya that this is not meant to be an exhaustive, comprehensive list. He's just giving you a sample of the derech. Right. Yeah, Tamar?
I'm just noticing that I think that on all of the things from Esther, I don't feel like we walked away with like what is the Ralbag's methodology, but I think you are saying that now.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool.
That is good. Yeah, you're right. I think we solidify that. And I'll mention one more thing, which I got specifically from Ruth here, is I think he has shown us a derech of analyzing acts of gimilus chasadim. In other words, look at it mishleichle. Look at what the person did, and look at what decision-making factors were taken into consideration or should have been taken into consideration, and then extrapolate universals from that and apply them, and then come up with real world examples and then apply that to your life. Whereas I think that sometimes we do this, but I feel like sometimes we just get focused on, it's gimilus chasadim, and this teaches you that you should be a gomel chesed, but not the mishleic analysis of how to do it. Yeah, see?
Yes, and also it's interesting that he doesn't, there's just really is no like in-depth analysis of the personalities, except for the fact that they, like, you assume that they're good people and these are things you should be emulating.
Yeah.
But it wasn't nothing too specific.
Right, that's true. Yeah, you don't get any, it almost is just like learning Mishlei. You got a Mishlei Chacham and Chachama,
Right, without
Without
knowing
any
anything
personality.
particular about the personalities. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you get a couple things about, Elimelech. You see
Right.
not really much about Nami at all,
Right. That's
or,
true.
but I think
I
you're just,
wonder if he
Boaz is good,
right.
Ruth is good.
I wonder if he, just to remind us, I said at the beginning, he does have his Ralbag's actual commentary. I wonder if we get more out of his commentary on any of this. I'm really not sure though. I want to mention one thing about this style of chesed. This was from Rabbi Moskowitz's hesped for his son Shmuli, alav shalom, that he said when Shmuli heard somebody, so Rabbi Moskowitz was describing ways to take on Shmuli's values. He said, work out a way to help someone. When Shmuli heard somebody he knows in the community needed help, it's not just that he ran off. He one time told me that there was a problem in the community. He told me the complications, all the questions. It was like a Tosfos, and he had to work out that everyone should be happy. He says, I can't just run there. I got to work it out first. Work out a way to help someone. I think that's like what you see from this, these examples from Boaz and Ruth. You got to work it out. Yeah. Okay, so you could look. This is nice that this is in line with that statement in the Gemara, even though it seems problematic on its own. That Megilas Rus is about Gemilas Chasadim, because we do see a lot of Gemilas Chasad in a Mishlaic way that we get from Rus, and hopefully it'll be on our minds. And yeah, a lot of untouched territory here. We got to write about what the Ralbag would say theologically and in terms of the system and all this other stuff. But yeah, okay, thanks. I'm glad this worked out well. I was happy with this. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. It's
you.
really
Okay,
interesting.
have a good Shabbos,
Thank
good Chodesh, and then eventually good Yantav. Okay.
Good Shabbos.
3 for 1 special.
Yeah.